are these people?
You ready for our last one?
Yes.
Okay. You read any of this yesterday before? Do you read any of this?
Kind of.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah. It's gonna be a rough one. I will try to do it justice. But
I can read it since you're kind of.
I know it's not that. It's just the emotional side of it, you know.
Yeah.
So, but we'll start with the less emotional. So this is Caitlin Johnstone. You know her, you love her. I frequently have her on the show, at least in article form. But she writes this quick little thing about the 10 dumbest things we're being asked to believe about Israel's war on Gaza. You ready to listen to the 10 dumb things I hate about this? So number one, that Israel had no idea what Hamas was up to prior to October 7th, but ever since October 7th has known about every hospital, mosque, school, refugee camp, and water tower that Hamas is hiding in. I mean, that alone is kind of like more people should pay attention to that one. Number two, that the blame for all the deaths caused by Israeli weapons launched by Israel rests solely on Hamas. Number three, that Hamas is using, quote, human shields, meaning Hamas bases are hidden amongst civilian populations, yet Israel is managing to kill, excuse me, thousands of civilians without doing any meaningful damage to Hamas. It would be perfectly fine to murder children by the thousands, even if they were being used as human shields, as though resolving a hostage situation by mowing down thousands of child hostages would be regarded as reasonable and acceptable by the public if it ever happened in our own country, that it is only by pure coincidence that Israel bombing Hamas targets in civilian infrastructure and residential buildings just so happens to look exactly the same as what you'd expect to see if Israel was simply bombing civilian infrastructure and residential buildings and lying about its reasons for doing so. I mean, Caitlin kind of on it, you know? Number six, that satellite images of entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble in Gaza have been caused by precision strikes directed solely at Hamas and have been carried out with the greatest of care for human life, despite Israeli officials openly saying that the emphasis is on damage and not on accuracy in this assault, and that Gaza will eventually turn into a city of tents and there will be no buildings. That this bombing campaign has anything to do with freeing Israeli hostages, as though the bombing campaign itself has not killed dozens of hostages, and as though anyone believes Israel would stop bombing Gaza after the hostages are returned. Yeah, I don't think that would happen. I mean, they still have been bombing. So, number seven, that this bombing campaign has anything to do with freeing Israeli hostages, as though the bombing campaign itself has not killed dozens of hostages. Those Israeli ones that they care so much about, right, Collin?
Mm-hmm.
And as though anyone believes Israel would stop bombing Gaza after the hostages are returned, that the only reason anyone could possibly oppose the detonation of thousands of bombs on an open-air prison full of children would be if they had very strong and hateful opinions toward the members of the religion of Judaism. That alone is what we've argued with people a lot over, you know? So, you know, that's that whole, it's the Muslims' fault, right?
Right.
Number nine, that Hamas attacked Israel entirely out of the blue and completely unprovoked, solely because they are evil and hate Jews. That's, yes. You know? So, last one, that Washington is powerless to stop this genocide that it is directly funding and supplying. Thoughts, Collin? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I just like the sarcastic way Caitlin puts all this. You know?
Yeah.
Like the 10 things that very clickbaity, you know. Little list clickbait. But
right. Let's get to the part where you want to make me cry more.
Yeah. So Caitlin writes, excuse me, we keep our gaze fixed on Gaza. So we keep our gaze fixed on Gaza no matter how much it hurts, no matter how horrifying it gets, no matter how much we cry, no matter how often we slump over and feel like we can't do it anymore. Caitlin writes, I hate every goddamn fucking second of this. I crack jokes here and there to highlight the ridiculousness of the pro-Israel position, but the truth is, I've never enjoyed this commentary job of mine less than I've enjoyed it this past month. Some nights, I see dead kids when I close my eyes. There's a phenomenon called the Tetris effect, where if you play the classic puzzle game a lot, you start seeing the colorful digital blocks in your mind's eye with the lights are out. For me, it's dead Palestinian kids. That's just my life now. As this horror drags on one seemingly endless day after another, I find myself acutely aware not just of the unfathomable suffering in Gaza, but of all the other millions of people around the world who are having the same experience I'm having, staring this nightmare dead in the eyes, day after day, week after week, unable to look away in good conscience. I saw an account with the handle @ExoMarxy say something on Twitter that I relate to so hard right now. Quote, I don't want to talk about anything else. I don't want to do work. I don't want to do chores or go to the gym or read a book. It reminds me of the feeling you get when a loved one is in intensive care. You feel every fucking second and your adrenaline won't settle and you can't sit still. It consumes you, becomes your life. You take short breaks here and there to get some grass under your feet, feel the wind in your hair, but you're only doing it so that you can jump back in and wade through this thing with the attention and reverence it deserves. You can't let yourself burn out, because if you do, you won't be able to do your own teeny tiny, almost insignificant little part to help fight this thing in whatever way you can. But it's more than that, really. It's more than the fight. There's also this acute awareness that even if it turns out nothing we can do can stop the slaughter in Gaza, it's still important to bear witness to it. You feel a responsibility, just as a human being on this planet, to keep your gaze fixed on what's happening and to not look away. Feels sacred. Your responsibility, I mean. I don't even really know what that word means, but that's the only word that clicks into place, feels appropriate when I describe this responsibility to witness the mass atrocity in Gaza with eyes wide open. It's a sacred duty that we have to our species, to the universe even, maybe. It could be as simple as an urge to resist the calls from the powerful to look away. All the world's most powerful institutions want us to avert our gaze, to scroll on, to disassociate, to take our attention elsewhere. We're all engaging in a very simple act of defiance by bringing attention awareness, the very last thing the powerful want our attention and awareness, one pair of eyes at a time. So we keep our gaze fixed on Gaza. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how horrifying it gets, no matter how much we cry, no matter how often we slump over and feel like we can't do it anymore, we keep our gaze fixed on Gaza. Because what else can we do? Nothing else feels right. Nothing else feels responsible. I don't know when this will end or why. I don't know if it will end because all the opposition made it politically untenable for Israel and its powerful Western allies to continue. Because there was nothing left to bomb or no one left to kill. It kind of feels like that's none of my business, because I'm in this with all of me no matter what. Come what may, my life doesn't really feel like it belongs to me anymore. Anyways, that's enough of that for the time being. Mainly, I just wanted to let everyone who's holding the same vigil know that I see you, and I appreciate you, and I value you, and you're not alone, and you never will be. I raise my glass to you, beautiful, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for bearing witness. Here's Comrade Misty. Friend of the show, INN member. I was just telling my husband how much I hate my job right now because I have to follow this, but the truth is I would follow it regardless. because we must. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Two things. This to me is 2020 all over again. In terms of what Caitlin described was exactly, like the weight of what happened to George Floyd, but I think the implication for me as a Black man existing in the world, to have that kind of realization of having your life kind of snuffed out of you due to every ism imaginable. It was just a lot. And coupled with that, we were in the middle of lockdown too. So it wasn't like I could just talk to anybody. Like I couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't talk to anybody. And at certain points, I didn't want to talk to anybody. So it was a very hard time. And I have to shout this person out. Shout out to Nuno Marquez, who sure a lot of you guys follow. And I've been talking to him a lot in terms of now he's French of Arab descent. So obvious, and he has friends in Palestine right now that he's wondering, like, are they okay? And I've actually really have appreciated him kind of sharing privately of like the reality of what he's going through and like what he's kind of been concerned about. I think that's definitely one of the things that's kind of humanized this time for me, because it's very reminiscent to what kind of happened to me in certain ways 3 years ago. But at the same time, I just realized for myself, I have to be very careful. And that's why I'm in therapy now.
Yeah.
Like, I agree with what Caitlin's saying is, I think when she says don't turn away, don't forget.
Yeah.
In the same way, to kind of bring it back to the beginning of, the show and all the activists speaking, well, many of them said, we cannot forget this in terms of voting, but we can't forget this in terms of just being human. And realize that that could be any one of what the Palestinians have been going through and like what other oppressed communities in the world are going through or have gone through.
Yeah.
And so, and those are the things that we have to fight for. So it's not a matter of, and I have to be very careful because obviously seeing a lot of kids naturally as a teacher does something to me.
Yeah.
So, so obviously I have to kind of protect my brain and protect my heart from seeing all of that too much, especially on Twitter. That being said, though, what I believe Caitlin's saying is, don't forget what is going on, because we have a responsibility to respond. And the idea that, and this kind of goes again to what I was saying, if you could see all this bullshit going on and vote in a way that is counter to the hurt and the pain that people have experienced, you are truly a monster. And I know there's going to be a lot of people in this country that will vote that way.
Yep.
And that's what scares. And fuck Biden and fuck the government. Like, fuck them. Like, because we know they're shit anyway. They're trash anyway. But I'm talking about the people on the street, and I want to assume the best from them, like who I was with on Saturday, because they were yelling, "Yeah, not vote, whatever." But we got a year to
Yeah,
go.
that's the bare minimum on top of that too. Like you should have already been there, you know?
Right.
I mean, I think with this story for me, Caitlin, as she frequently does, is able to put what many of us have been dealing with and thinking about, especially in the space, on paper in words that like make sense, you know? So
Hmm.
yeah, I
I
was telling people directly that like that shit affects us. Like, and I've told you many a time, like I feel compelled to have to like see it, you know?
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of people that won't. There's a lot of people right now that aren't going to see that.
Right.
And
And I
your government
think
directly doesn't want you to see it. So
right. And
it's
so
hard,
I
but
think it goes without saying to me, it's important to speak out on it. And
yeah,
like, and and for people like Nuno, and obviously that's what he tweets out a lot, and I get where he's coming from, but at almost to the point of the risk that he has
yeah,
given his job, that or even any one of us could, there's like, in just speaking out and being an ally, that can mean your livelihood.
yeah. Well, and I think
But
for me, this is like the least we can do is share some of that trauma, you know?
mhm,
Like, I
share the
couldn't
trauma, but
imagine
then
living it. So,
right, I share the trauma, yes, but
yeah,
then take the next step. And again, this is kind of where we failed with George Floyd. That people were consoling me and the black for a moment,
yeah.
but then like after a
Then crickets.
while, yeah,
Yeah,
and I think for me that's been the huge thing, is I don't want that to happen again. I want this to be the
well,
fuel to actually start something. And I will say this, like, me, like, I'm very hardened to politics at this point. I did sense that there was something different this time going to the protests.
yeah,
I just hope I'm wrong. I hope that I will not be I'm sure I will be,
yeah,
but I hope that I won't be as disappointed in terms of the drop off that came off of George Floyd within months, that this somewhat carries over into the next year in
and
terms
we're gonna
of
be forced.
tangible action
Yeah,
that people are willing to take to shake the establishment for real this time.
yeah.
I hope that does occur, but I'm also not holding my breath to
I,
happen either.
I think here's the thing, and I talked about this in my second story, right? I don't think it's going to be us. I think as far as the world stage is concerned, what the U.S. is going to do is not a factor here. Honestly, like I think you are going to see other European countries, other West, Eastern countries, like they're going to come in and do something about it, and like you know, we might not come out the best in all of that. So I don't know. Like that can go wrong many a ways. So I'm hoping things, there's some adults in the room somewhere, but I have yet to see that that's the case. But I am hopeful
Right.
that people seem to be figuring this issue out regardless. Although I've seen some classic propaganda still working. So, you know, eventually we'll get though. We told you, sorry, you were right, but until then, you just got to keep watching. So, anyway,